Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the farm. We are down here at the base of the hill where we have all of our lateral lines. They come down to our collection tote, our food grade IBC 275 gallon tote that we have down here at the bottom of the hill. Looks like I only got about 30 gallons in it today, but I am going to go ahead and show you guys how we are handling transferring the sap from out of the IBC tote into buckets to get them back up to the sugar shack. Show you guys the pump that we use and show you what's going on back here in the sugar bush. So I picked up this Maleef, maybe is how you say it, transfer pump off of Amazon. I have had a couple other of their tools that I've been pretty happy with. They do, knockoff isn't really the right word, but they make tools that run off the DeWalt battery platform. So I had their battery hot glue gun was the first thing that I got, because battery hot glue gun, how cool is that? Then I got the plastic welder, and then I decided I was gonna try out their transfer pump because we wanted something that worked on battery for back here in the woods. And I did have a 12 volt transfer pump that hooked up to a car battery just on like a pair of alligator clips. But I figured if I got something like this is something that I would use outside of sugar season as well. And it has really been working great so far. So I'll show you guys. It was kind of cold and cloudy today, but the sun is just coming out and it's starting to warm up out. The sap is getting moving. Some of these lines better than others, but there's different numbers of taps on these lines also, so that makes sense. Different sun exposures, all that jazz. So my initial plan down here on the tote was I got this hose fitting that's screwed onto the valve on the tote here, but I bought a really cheap one and I am unable to get it to not leak. I think because there's so few threads here, I just couldn't quite get the hose that I have seated on it, so it was leaking pretty good. So we came up with another option for getting the sap out. So I got these two, I think they marketed them as RV hoses. So they are food grade hoses that I connect to my transfer pump. I've got the longer one that we go through the lid on top of the pump. And all I did was I attached it to a piece of copper tubing to make it rigid because it had lots of memory in it. It always wanted to coil back up, so I couldn't get it to stay down at the bottom of the tank. I drop this in through the top. I have a shorter hose. Connect that to the outlet side of the pump. And then I'm able to just use this to fill the buckets. I have been very impressed with the flow rate. Don't remember exactly, it was 7 and some change gallons a minute. I think it's living up to that. It's self-priming. Been very happy with that. And there you go, that's about 4.5 gallons right there. So you probably saw in the video on the ride in, but it has just been an absolute muddy mess back here. We talked about in an earlier video at the beginning of the season, before we did all this, as we had run the lateral lines before we started collecting sap, we were considering putting another IBC tote in the back of the Gator and using that to carry the sap back up to the sugar shop. Couldn't have filled the IBC tote, but the weight capacity in the back of this is 1,000 pounds. So could have easily carried, you know, upwards of 100 gallons. And we have only had one over 100 gallon day so far. And that was the day that we tapped. So We decided to go buckets because the trail is just so sloppy wet. If we were to ever get stuck and we needed to offload, it's going to be much easier to offload buckets into the tractor, into an ATV, whatever it would be, to get some weight out of the gator to get it unstuck. So that's why we ended up going with the buckets instead of a larger collection tote in the back of the gator. So we have had to make a couple of trips on it some different days because we can only get 12 buckets in the back. Don't quite fill them all the way up to 5 gallons because then they're a bear to move and a bear to dump once we get up there without spilling any. So that's how we arrived at choosing the buckets over the big tote in the back of the gator. Something else that's been really cool to watch, the reason we picked this 3/16 sap tubing is because on this hill back here, it is actually pulling vacuum. So there is about 45 feet of drop, 45 feet of drop from the top of this hill to the bottom, according to the topography map that I looked at. And so over that fall, as the sap is coming down this 3/16 tubing, it is actually pulling vacuum. So we are just as much pulling the sap out of the tree as it is coming out of the tree, like it would when we had just done buckets and drop tubes down into the buckets. And I already went around and checked everything today, but there have actually been some days where a spile or something was a little bit loose and you can actually hear it sucking air as the vacuum is pulling down this hillside, which has actually been pretty cool. We knew that's how they said it would work, but actually seeing it in function and seeing it doing it really has been neat. And again, this is 72 taps right now across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lateral runs. We have that choked down to 4 that only goes to the barrel, tying together a couple smaller of those lateral runs to try to get to around 20 taps on each of them to help with pulling that vacuum that I just talked about. All right, and then when it's time to pack up, I just take my hoses off, drain everything, make sure they're empty. Hose goes back in the bucket. The big hose I leave it down here. Do the same thing, drain this one. And then since I leave it down here, I just attach it male end to female end so the bugs don't get in it. Because bugs love sap. Close the lid back up, give the pump a little bump just to get it emptied out. This goes in the bucket, goes back up to the shop, charge the battery. Oh, pretty cool. So there it is. That's what collecting looks like now that we have the gravity fed system back here on the Sugarbush Hill. Saves a little bit of time, probably about half the time that I was using before, but I am not covering miles of trail. I am not carrying buckets up and down hills like this. Who cooks for you, buddy? Not carrying buckets up and down trails like this. It just goes into the big collection vat, into the gator, up to the sugar shop, and run through the RO and soon to be maple syrup. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Really appreciate everybody that follows along with us during our sugar season. This has really been, every year we have done something that has completely changed the game for us in terms of taking some work out of our sugaring process, whether it was adding the RO, whether it was adding the vacuum filter, whether it was adding the walk-in cooler, and now adding the gravity system down here out in the woods. This has really taken a lot of the physical labor out of it, and especially with the vacuum, I will have to compare notes and look at data at the end of the season, but it seems like production-wise, it's doing a really good job, and per tap, it's giving us a really good amount of sap. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, think about hitting that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and until next time, y'all, we will see you.